I never expected my day-to-day routine to change so drastically. Caring for patients had always been about maintaining boundaries, following protocols, and offering comfort without crossing lines. I prided myself on professionalism, on keeping my emotions locked away behind a steady, reassuring smile. But when he arrived, something in the ordinary rhythm of my work shifted in a way I hadn't anticipated. He wasn't like the others. There was a subtle gravity in his presence, a quiet intensity that pulled attention without asking for it. At first, I told myself it was empathy, a natural response to someone clearly struggling. He had been through a lot, and his eyes carried a mixture of pain and curiosity that made him seem almost fragile, yet oddly magnetic. I found myself listening more carefully, noticing the smallest details, the way he hesitated before speaking, the way he glanced at me with a fleeting vulnerability that seemed to beg for understanding. Our interactions began innocently enough. I offered advice, tips, and reassurance, careful to keep things professional. But his gratitude was different from the typical polite nod or forced smile. He would linger slightly longer than necessary, his words carrying a warmth that seemed intentionally personal. Each conversation left a subtle imprint on my mind. I noticed the way his voice changed when he spoke about his struggles, the faint tremor in his laughter that made me lean in, wanting to comfort him even more. I knew it wasn't supposed to happen. I knew the rules. Yet I couldn't ignore the magnetic pull that grew with each passing day. It wasn't only about attraction. It was about the connection, something deeper than superficial desire. There was an emotional intimacy that neither of us had invited, yet it thrived in the spaces between our words. I began to anticipate his visits, replaying conversations in my mind long after he had left. I found myself crafting advice with extra care, offering support beyond what my duties required, all under the guise of concern. At times, I caught myself lingering near his door longer than necessary, feeling a warmth in my chest I hadn't allowed myself to feel for years. That I struggled with guilt. The professional lines I had vowed never to blur were starting to feel like fragile threads, threatening to snap with every subtle glance or careful word. I would catch myself imagining what it would be like to cross the boundary, to allow a touch, a whispered word, a stolen moment that wasn't meant to exist. And yet there was a thrill in it, a dangerous excitement that made my pulse quicken and my thoughts race. By the time he left that day, thanking me in a voice that was unusually soft, I felt an unexpected ache, a longing that terrified me. The routine I had clung to was gone. Something had shifted irreversibly, and I knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The moment after David tasted the pudding, I couldn't stop noticing him. The way he held the spoon, the careful way he wiped his lips with the back of his hand, it all seemed heightened, almost charged. I tried to tell myself it was just my imagination, that I was reading too much into a simple, innocent interaction. But there was something about the way he looked at me, a quiet curiosity mixed with surprise, that made my pulse quicken. I realized I was standing too close, my arm brushing against his as I reached for another dish, and I felt a small thrill at the contact. I caught myself thinking about how soft his hands felt, the warmth of his skin, and immediately scolded myself in my head. We started joking lightly, teasing each other over who got the better bite, and each laugh seemed to stretch the space between casual and something more. I noticed the way he leaned just slightly closer when he spoke, as if the room wasn't big enough to contain the unspoken tension between us. Every small gesture felt amplified. The accidental touch when passing a spoon, the shared glance that lingered too long, the way he smiled when he realized I was watching him. I could feel my own awareness intensifying, a mix of curiosity and guilt that twisted in my chest. I knew I shouldn't enjoy this attention, shouldn't find pleasure in the way he responded to me, yet I couldn't help myself. I tried to distract myself by focusing on the task at hand, moving to the counter to prepare another treat, but he followed, hovering nearby under the guise of offering help. His presence was magnetic, impossible to ignore, and I felt my thoughts growing tangled with desire and self-reproach. The way he shifted from foot to foot, the subtle way his gaze tracked mine, all of it made my stomach tighten in a way I wasn't expecting. I found myself brushing crumbs off his sleeve more often than necessary, noticing the warmth of his skin, the slight tremor of excitement I imagined in him. Each moment felt dangerous and thrilling at the same time. The conversation turned to lighter topics, but our words were laced with a tension neither of us addressed directly. He laughed softly at my jokes, and I noticed the faint blush on his cheeks, though I couldn't tell if it was from the pudding or something else entirely. I caught myself imagining scenarios I knew I shouldn't, thinking about what it would feel like to step closer, to let the boundaries blur just a little. I tried to convince myself it was harmless curiosity, but the truth was, the pull between us was undeniable. Every accidental touch, every shared laugh, every lingering look built a momentum I felt powerless to resist. By the time the kitchen quieted, I realized the simplicity of offering him a taste had opened something unexpected. I felt an intoxicating mixture of guilt and anticipation, aware that we had crossed an invisible line, one neither of us had named but both sensed. David's surprise and subtle enjoyment mirrored my own, and in that quiet, I understood that our interaction had shifted from innocent sharing to something far more charged. My heart raced as I acknowledged it. The thrill of desire, the danger of crossing boundaries, and the magnetic tension that now hung between us, heavy and unspoken. After that afternoon, I couldn't stop thinking about him. David's presence lingered in my mind, in ways that made me both excited and uneasy. Every time I closed my eyes, I replayed the way he looked at me when I offered him the pudding, the soft surprise in his expression, the small unintentional touches that had sent a jolt through me. I told myself it was just a fleeting curiosity, something innocent that had happened between a young man and a trusted friend. Yet deep down I knew that it had been more than that. The tension had shifted into something I couldn't ignore. The next time I saw him, I found myself consciously positioning myself closer, finding reasons to touch him, brushing his sleeve, adjusting his collar, handing him the spoon with deliberate slowness. I could see the surprise in his eyes each time, a mixture of curiosity and awareness that mirrored my own. Every movement was loaded, charged with a subtle electricity neither of us spoke aloud. I felt my pulse quicken, my thoughts scattered, trying to reconcile the thrill of this growing connection with the undeniable guilt that accompanied it. We continued sharing small bites, laughing at minor accidents, teasing over who got the sweetest portion, yet each moment became a silent exchange of tension. The closeness was intoxicating. I noticed the way he leaned toward me slightly when he spoke, the warmth of his hand when it brushed mine, the almost imperceptible pause before he looked away. Each gesture was magnified in my mind, and I caught myself savoring it, feeling the line between innocence and desire blur. I realized I was now waiting for these moments, craving them even as I feared what they meant. There was a moment when I accidentally let my hand linger on his shoulder a fraction too long, and I saw him stiffen slightly, eyes widening in surprise. I felt a thrill I hadn't expected, mixed with a sharp pang of guilt. I immediately pulled back, but the moment had been enough to confirm what I had been feeling. The attraction was mutual, though neither of us had yet given it a name. The room seemed smaller suddenly, every glance heavier, every gesture amplified. I could feel my own breath quickening, and I imagined his heartbeat mirroring mine. By the end of our time together, I realized that what started as a simple act, offering him a taste, had turned into a dangerous dance of emotions. I was drawn to him in ways that felt wrong yet undeniable, and he seemed equally captivated, each of us aware of the unspoken boundary we were approaching but neither willing to cross completely, at least not yet. The thrill of desire, the excitement of secrecy, and the tension of forbidden connection hung between us, tangible and intoxicating. I knew that something had shifted irrevocably, that the innocent game of sharing a dessert had become an awakening neither of us could ignore. The quiet of the house emphasized it, the unspoken acknowledgement in our eyes, the lingering glances and the subtle touches, all of it confirming that this was no longer casual, no longer innocent, and no longer reversible. The next time I saw David, I felt the pull immediately, stronger than ever. It wasn't just the memory of our last encounter. It was the awareness that both of us now knew what the other felt. The air between us was charged, every gesture amplified by anticipation. I found myself looking for excuses to be near him, to hand him a dish, to brush crumbs off his sleeve, anything that would allow the contact, even fleeting, to happen again. Each small touch, each shared laugh was a secret we both understood. A subtle confirmation that the line had already been crossed emotionally, even if physically it remained just out of reach. We shared another dessert, this time a rich, silky chocolate mousse. I watched him closely as he tasted it, noticing the slight widening of his eyes, the faint blush across his cheeks. I offered him a bite from my spoon, holding it a fraction too close, letting the moment stretch. He hesitated, then leaned forward slightly, and the brief contact sent a rush of awareness through me. It was dangerous, thrilling, forbidden, and I couldn't help but savor every second. The guilt surged immediately afterward, sharp and real, but it was mingled with an undeniable craving, a longing for the tension to continue, for the unspoken bond to grow. Our conversation became lighter in words but heavier in meaning. Each laugh, each playful tease, carried a weight neither of us could articulate. I caught him staring at me for just a moment too long, and I felt the same in return. It was a silent acknowledgement. We both knew we were stepping into something we shouldn't, yet we were drawn to it, compelled by a magnetic pull that refused to be denied. The ordinary act of sharing a taste had evolved into a subtle, intoxicating game, and the more we engaged, the more aware I became of the power this forbidden closeness held. Eventually, the moment ended and we separated, but the tension didn't leave, it followed me, a quiet hum in my thoughts. I realized that what started as a casual offer had awakened something far beyond simple curiosity. There was desire, there was excitement, there was danger, and there was no turning back. David, with his polite innocence and subtle charm, had become an irresistible presence in my mind, a secret I carried and would carry, one that was mine alone to savor. I knew our interactions would always hover on the edge, charged with the memory of these shared moments, the thrill of knowing we had crossed boundaries emotionally. Even if no one else could ever see, and in the quiet that followed, I understood the truth. This was not about the dessert, not about playful sharing. It was about the awakening of something forbidden, a magnetic tension that neither of us could resist, a game of desire and restraint that had begun with a single simple act. And in that moment I accepted it, acknowledged it, and let it exist in the secret spaces between us, a dangerous, intoxicating truth neither of us could deny. That quiet thrill, that unspoken connection, would linger long after the dessert was gone, a secret dance of temptation and awareness that neither of us could ever truly forget.